Two important elements of this course are staying in control of the conversation when dealing with a disagreement, dispute or conflict, and making sure that the others involved do not feel challenged or threatened. It's always better if it feels like you're working together to solve a problem. Earlier, we saw two ways that Mary could approach her neighbour Peter about the rubbish bins by their gate. A big difference between the positive and negative conversations was the words that she used. Conflict resolution professionals say that language can be the biggest help and the biggest problem when people try to settle differences. Language lets us share our thoughts and feelings. On the downside, we often send messages, or the other person receives messages, that we didn't really intend. The chance of that increases as a situation becomes more emotional, because many of us are not very good at talking about our feelings. I could devote a whole course just to the language used in a difference of opinion. Instead, I'll look at a few of the words and phrases to use, and those to avoid, in a disagreement, dispute, and even a conflict, although hopefully these suggestions will help prevent the last one. Good words and phrases to use include hello, an obvious and positive conversation starter. Remember how Mary and Peter exchanged greetings in our positive conversation in section 1. A cheerful hello can make the other person feel more comfortable, even if they seem to start with a negative emotion such as anger. How are you? A quick, almost ritual follow-up to hello can help relax people, even if you are nervous. Think back to the brief exchange between Mary and Peter in the positive conversation in section 1, before Mary brought up her real objective. Compare that with the negative conversation, where Mary didn't bother with a greeting and went straight in, leaving Peter confused and defensive. Be careful though. Overdoing this can unsettle someone more than leaving it out. Think how you feel when a telephone cold caller asks, "And how are you today?" Speak rather than talk. Although these words don't seem very different, research shows that speak is better than talk, particularly when emotions are high. Saying you want to talk is likely to get a negative response, while something like "can we speak about" tends to be better received. Some communication specialists think this is linked to phrases such as "you're all talk" or "talk is cheap." An informal word such as chat can work well, as in,
"I'd like to chat about ways we can make sure the staff room is clean and tidy,"
rather than,
"I want to talk to you about keeping the staff room clean and tidy."
willing. We want to avoid giving others in a conversation an opportunity to close down with a no. Research suggests that someone who is reluctant to do something, such as discuss allegations of inappropriate behaviour at work, is more likely to respond well when the word willing is used instead of phrases such as "are you prepared to" or "would you." For example,
"I've already told you. I'm not even going to talk about this so-called bullying."
But you would be willing to sit down with me and look at what your colleagues are saying?
Well, I suppose so.
that counts as yes. It's not clear why this happens. One suggestion is that most people see themselves as reasonable, even in a disagreement, dispute or conflict, so they like to seem willing to do something. Before using this, make sure you know what you'd like the other person to do and that it is in fact reasonable to ask it. And one small step which can get the biggest results in any conversation, not just where there's a confrontation, is to start using and instead of but. Specialists say this can quickly bring about better communication. This report sets out the situation very well, and it would be even clearer if you put a graph in paragraph 2, is more encouraging than, "This report sets out the situation very well, but it needs a graph in paragraph 2. The but undermines everything that comes before it. So in our second example, the colleague hears only that their report needs improvement. In blanking out, "This report sets out the position very well," the but could very easily get a challenging response. The first example makes exactly the same point while sounding more positive and even enthusiastic. Something rather than anything. Another slight difference which means a lot is between something and anything. Other research indicates that it's easier to be positive when asked, is there something we can do, and easier to be negative when the question uses anything. Think back again to Peter and Mary discussing the bins by the gate. In the positive conversation, he responds positively when she asks, can we do something about making them less of a hazard? If she had asked, is there anything we can do to make them less of a hazard? His response might have been more dismissive, such as the challenging, like what? I've been discussing words to use. Here are some that you should try to avoid, especially when emotions are building up. Always, every, never. We often hear these when people are growing angry, and very often it's not true that somebody always or never does anything in particular. When it's not true, it undermines the point you were trying to make and can get someone defensive. Remember how Mary told Peter that he always leaves boxes scattered around by the gate, and how quick he was to become defensive and unhelpful.
You never let me know when you'll be late home from work.
Gets the response.
You always moan when I tell you I've got to stay late.
A more positive and accurate statement might be,
I like to know when you'll be in for dinner.
removing the challenge is more likely to earn a positive response, like,
I understand you're annoyed whenever I'm late home. I'll try to call.
sorry. A genuine apology can go a long way. Sometimes that's all that's needed to break down a disagreement, dispute or conflict. A neighbour's statement such as,
Oh, I'm sorry, my dog was barking all afternoon. Next time I have a hospital appointment that might overrun, I'll get my sister to look after him.
might even prompt you to offer to look after the dog. On the other hand, this sorry, followed by a but, could be calculated to get someone more upset.
I'm sorry, but if you think I'm going to move my car before I'm ready, you're mistaken.
Why? We often hear that why is a good question to ask, along with who, what, where and when. In fact, why is often best avoided. It can come across as challenging, making people uncomfortable and defensive. A question based on what invites a better response. Why do you light a bonfire every Sunday afternoon? Sounds like an accusation. Did you spot the every in there, adding to the negative tone? What is it about Sunday afternoons that makes it such a good time for you to light a bonfire? Could be the start of a positive conversation. Yes, but. We've already looked at using and instead of but. When someone goes one step further and says yes, but, that can be even worse because it often means no, you're wrong and here's why. If you're in a conversation that does not move on, check how many times you've heard yes, but. More than once or twice means it's time to rethink that conversation. We've thought about some simple ways in which we can improve how we say things. In the next sessions, we'll look at what we can hear in a conversation.